Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Too High Podcast. It is I, Seth Galina, alongside Diante Lee. Diante, what's going on?
Not a whole lot, man. Not a whole lot. We are inching towards the finish line of this season. Honestly, it's funny. I was talking to some people yesterday, and maybe this is just because this season has gone so long that I might be just getting a little loopy. But like last night before I went to bed, I was like, you know what? I might actually be happy if the Bengals win the Super Bowl. Like, I think I'm at the point now where I'm like, the nice narrative thing is okay too. Like, I just want something. I just want a good game, honestly. And I actually think that sneakily we might get a pretty good game out of this one.
All right, so on today's podcast, we are going to talk to you guys a little bit about some NFL draft prospects and a piece that Diante has been putting together the last couple of weeks about filling out a defense with these prospects. And then we are going to talk about the Super Bowl. We are going to talk about the Bengals when they have the football versus the Rams defense, and then the Rams offense when they have the football against the Bengals defense, and how those things will play out, and we'll give you predictions at the end. As you guys know, the Too High Podcast is presented by PFF, Pro Football Focus. From now until February 14th, that's coming up. That's my mom's birthday, actually. You can get 25% off any PFF subscription if you use the promo code SUPER25, SUPER25. And what you can get with the PFF subscription, as you know, PFF's locked article content, so a lot of me and Diante stuff. NFL Green Line, which is up 27 units this season. The Player Prop Tool, which shows a positive and negative value for every NFL prop. The NFL Draft Guide, and more. Support the pod. Use promo code SUPER25 for 25% off any PFF subscription. All right. Let's talk NFL draft very quickly before we get into the Super Bowl. Let's lose all our listeners right now before we actually talk about what they came here to listen to. So you put a piece together. It's something that I like to do, and I did this a couple times last year. I think it's really fascinating to do it this way, is looking at these draft prospects on the defensive side of the ball, but like specifically, like let's build a defense out of these players. Like let's put a nose, let's put a 5 tech, an inside linebacker, a down safety, blah blah blah, all those different positions. So as you're going through it, like let's talk about the defensive line. When you look at these players that you've put in there, anyone that sticks out on the defensive line is like a Diante favorite.
Devontae Wyatt was like one of the first ones I watched. I was like, oh, this is an animal. This dude is an animal. Like, and obviously, I mean, a lot of this is evident. We spent a lot of time talking about Georgia defensively this past year, but I think one of the first things I saw when I was watching him fit the run was like, oh, if he was like the full-time nose tackle, he would also be the best nose tackle in college football, right? Like that was like one of my first initial takeaways. And I think that there's still some things that he can gain in terms of pass rush, and he's actually not bad. He's a pretty good mover for being a 300-plus pound guy. So that was like the first thing I looked at was like, okay, this is somebody who can play on third down and add value in case you needed him to as like a nose in terms of pass rush. He and Logan Hall were like the two that really kind of stuck out to me. Logan Hall is going to be an animal, and he still probably plays a little bit too high. So when he fixes his pad level, or hopefully, if he works on his pad level a little bit, there's even more that he can gain in terms of like maximizing his explosiveness. But you can see a lot of that, like his length, his ability to kind of lock guys out, make plays in the backfield. He's got pretty good movement skills for a guy that I think is like 6'6" and 280.
6'6", yeah.
So yeah, he's pretty impressive as far as the interior guys.
With Logan Hall, not to cut you off, but with Logan Hall, I mean, we talked about Logan with Derek Klassen, 3 weeks ago or something. And we asked him, like, who's your like kind of personal favorite guy? Maybe not the top guy, but on the entire defensive line. And he said Logan Hall. And then I think both of us watched him after that. And yeah, he stands out.
You get it immediately.
You get it. He is flying off the ball. Like you said, he plays high, and he's almost like jumping into his moves.
Yeah,
right. Like it's a lot, and like
it's a little extreme. Yeah, some of it's extreme.
But like you just love watching him. Like you just want a guy who's like, give me the next game, give me the next game, give me the next game, because it's so fun to watch. And yeah, I'm a big fan of him. And I'll talk. With Wyatt, I thought what he did at the Senior Bowl when you saw just one-on-ones, pass rush, and he was able to use his hands. then I was like, okay, yeah, give me this guy, and I put him in my D-line rankings, as the number one D-line. So like I'm on board that train in terms of interior defensive line talent.
Let me ask you, where do you fall on the snap count thing for Jordan Davis? Like, I'm kind of past that conversation. Like, I think that all of this first of all, it's the NFL draft, so naturally a lot of this stuff gets overdone because we kind of all get overexposure with some of these players over this long of a process. But how real or how much do you care about some of the snap count stuff that goes on with Jordan Davis?
Look, we don't disagree on a lot of things on the Too High podcast. It concerns me a little bit. Like, I do think of a guy now. Okay, the NFL is changing. I do think that the role of the nose, the role of the interior triangle, let's say, whether it's offense or defense, whether it's guard, center, guard on offense, or whether it's tackle, nose, Mike on defense, it's changing, and the value is slowly creeping back up to kind of, I think, where it was, in like the 90s or whatever, the 2000s. With that said, I do think you still need a pass rush, and you see with Jordan Davis like a lot, like he has a very nice first step. Like he can get quick into moves. You saw him do some stunts, move around, loop around, do all that stuff. Like he is very quick. Like for his giant body, he is very quick. Right. But I do think it does concern me a bit that like you pretty much at this point would have to take him off the field on early downs. But he is like, talking about like strength wise, he'll hold people up. He'll let his backers make plays for him behind him, which won't show up on the scoreboard or on the stat sheet, but he's making plays. Like you put him in the middle, he'll make plays against the run. But I do think like we're not there yet, where we can go and take like where's he going to get taken? The Chargers are at 17. That to me is like 17. Borderline for me.
I think that, that's one thing that we do agree on in this. I do think that like the conversation of being like a top half first round guy is probably, it's out of the snap count thing. I think is real enough to where you probably don't take him in the first round, and definitely not like in the first half of the first round or near the top half of the first round. I think.
But then once you get him in the second round, you're getting.
Oh, I mean, like it's super surplus value based on like just what he provides when he's on the field. If you're telling me like in the second round you can get a guy who can be basically a run defense unto himself on first and second down, then yeah, absolutely, especially like on his rookie deal. I think the thing that I'm probably most interested to see is whether or not, a team is going to be committed to maybe changing him physically a little bit. I do think that he will have to trim a bit as a 6'6" guy in the NFL, even if you are just a first and second down player. I just think that he'll be even more explosive and more useful. And to your point, he does have a really good first step. So if he goes from being listed at 340, God knows what he probably played at, but listed at 340, if you get him down to maybe a listed 315-ish, then you might be talking about something, right? If he's at the same kind of weight as Devontae Wyatt. So that's interesting to me. Like you said, I probably, on my end, I probably just don't think as much about it, maybe because I'm making assumptions that there will be changes made when he gets to the pros. But yeah, I mean, like you said, once you get out of like that top half of the first round, for teams that are already good, right? Now we're talking about teams that are already good prior to turning over to the second round. You get a player like that, you're cooking if you have a nose that's as good as he is.
One of the things that kind of stands out when I watch the two Georgia interior tackles is just like, I wonder, and the NFL is changing, like I said, but I do wonder, we know what Georgia wants their defensive tackles to do, and that is control. You wonder what both of them would look like, especially Wyatt. Davis is a little different story, but especially Wyatt, if they were quote unquote allowed to be more penetrators and get that first step in the gap and go. Because I think Wyatt then looks like I still don't think he's a top half of the first round type of guy, but I think you're cementing him for sure in that second half of the first round.
100%. Yeah, I agree with you wholeheartedly on that. Were there any other defensive tackles that maybe I missed out on that you really liked?
I like the UConn kid, Travis Jones.
He's interesting.
He's very interesting. Again, like he fits more. And so this is what I was thinking as I was watching Davis and Travis Jones from Connecticut was, I kept thinking about Sebastian Joseph Day with the Rams. Because it's like, yes, like, this like kind of like stereotypical, prototypical nose guard, that's my old lingo there, nose guard.
They don't...
Wait till we talk about safety men a little later.
Right.
I think like he's such a big player. He just like controls alignment, right? His because he does have long reach and he controls alignment.
And he's huge. Yeah,
and he's huge. But I think about like what Sebastian Joseph Day was doing in Brandon Staley's system last year, and how a lot of 3-4 teams are playing their nose in modern football. Like you can be a quicker type of smaller type of player. In that, like, yes, we play gap and a half, but we're gonna like, backdoor stuff. We're gonna try and quickly front door stuff. Like, I think, and that's what Sebastian Joseph Day was one of my favorite players to watch last year. He's been injured for most of this year. I'm not even sure if he's gonna play in the Super Bowl. But like that type of player is probably closer to Travis Jones from Connecticut, even though don't have the numbers in front of me. I would imagine he's a little bit bigger than Joseph Day. Right. But the difference between Joseph Day and Jordan Davis is pretty big.
Right. Yeah, sizable.
Yeah, it's very, very sizable.
I think it's pretty significant. But yeah, Travis Jones is definitely somebody who's interesting to me.
Travis Jones actually in 3 games against Power 5 teams. I wrote this in my article this week. 3 games against Power 5 teams, so very small sample size. But the highest graded interior defensive lineman against Power 5 teams this season at like 89.5, just above Devontae Wyatt, I believe. So like in the big games, they play Clemson, Vanderbilt, and Purdue. He showed out. He's a really good player. So I like him somewhere in the second round, something like that. All right, quickly. Defensive ends, anyone stand out?
Defensive ends for me, a lot of the names at the top are obvious, so I won't like belabor that too much. Obviously, Kayvon Thibodeau is really interesting to me. He's kind of a raw skill set guy for as athletic as he is, and that does not mean that he's not still like a top 5 talent. I do believe that. It's just there's no way that you can watch him and not recognize the fact that there is still a level of rawness in his game, which makes it kind of interesting to me in terms of like year one fits, right? Like, I don't know if you can just drop him in to some 4-down system and say, hey, now you're just like full-time, bendy, shoot up the field, pass rush type, and think that you're going to get like an 8 to 10 sack season out of him as a rookie. I think that's a little ambitious. I think that it actually might be in his best interest if he ended up in a 3-4 style of system where he can do something similar to what he was doing at Oregon. And you kind of got to build on all of his skills because he is athletic enough to drop into like the flats and coverage outside of tight ends and things like that. Like, he's actually pretty good ranging to the ball out in space. I like that in his film. But in terms of like pure pass rush ability, he still has some work to do. No real go-to move yet. He's decent as a power rusher. He's decent with like his arm over, his chops and rips and things like that. Obviously, because he's explosive and he's got long ass arms. So he's able to use some of these things to his strength. It's just like not refined. And that's kind of been the book on him basically his entire career at Oregon. So, I think that a lot of development is still there, but there's no way that you can pass on those traits. So like, he's an obvious one. Sleeper for me is Drake Jackson. He's on the taller end of the edge rusher.
No more enough USC talk. It's over.
I think he's a better bender as a pass rusher than he gets credit for because they use him more like a true outside backer than as a pass rusher. So there's still some things to learn there. And then outside of that, like the other guy that I really liked was Arnold Ebiketie.
Oh my God.
Freak man, like complete
freak. No, he's a freak.
Yeah, complete athletic freak. Really strong as well for being a guy that's as explosive as he is. So I think that he's one of those guys that can step in. Like when I think about these teams that have built their fronts out of like all the freak like height, weight, speed guys like the Ravens. Like if they need it, they happen to not really need.
Yeah, like if this was last year, he was coming out last year.
Like he's
and then
100% at the top of his. Yeah, he would 100% be at the top of their board in terms of edge rushers that'd be available to him. So like for those types of teams that we think about, like I would not be surprised if a team like the Giants, say with the McMartindale, look at Ebiketie and say like we want to get that guy as soon as we can. Yeah. So yeah, he's a really interesting guy for me.
Okay, we're just going to stick on defensive lines because we don't have time to go through all the defense positions. We'll split it up. But I just wanted to finish with something that I find is kind of funny is you look at the difference between Aiden Hutchinson and Kayvon Thibodeau. And it's funny to me because they're both like going to play defensive end at the, edge rusher, quote unquote, at the NFL level. But it's something you said about him, like, oh, let's put this guy. Where do they play in 3-4 defenses? That's the funny thing to me as the big difference. You just said it. Where does Kayvon Thibodeau play? He's still an edge, and you can drop him into coverage. When Michigan goes to a 3-4, which they did on occasion, like everyone does now, honestly.
Right.
Where does Hutchinson go? He kicks inside. To a 4 tech. And that is like, so it's funny to think about the differences where it's like, if you would have saw like a little more from Thibodeau in terms of refinement, like you said, he's the first overall pick.
Yeah, like no question. We're not even having a conversation.
We're not having this conversation. But who has all the refinement and can play along the defensive line? It's
Hutchinson. But the trade-off with him, right, is like, what is the actual ceiling? Because I don't think it's a Bosa-esque ceiling. I don't see the kind of... He has decent hands, but it's not like the level of hands that you see from a Bosa's, and certainly not the bend
to me, that
you get from those guys.
To me, it's can he get to the corner against NFL tackles consistently? Because he does play a little high. He's not Logan Hall, but he does play high, and he doesn't have that bend that you're looking for just to like get around. I mean, I don't want to compare him to Von Miller, but I have Von Miller on the brain because of the Rams. But like, Von Miller's got that ghost technique. Like he's getting low. He's like almost parallel to the line to the ground. That's a first overall pick, right?
Right. No
Hutchinson,
debate.
great against the run. Super strong. He's actually explosive. He's a freak athlete. He just doesn't have that bend that you're looking for, that ankle flexion that you're looking for, that center of gravity thing. So I'm super interested in that. But that's enough draft talk to last us quite a while, to tell you the truth. All right.
Oh, buddy, we got a whole off season ahead of us. Yeah, right.
All right, let's get into the Super Bowl. But before we do, just want to remind you guys, Too High's podcast is sponsored by Western and Southern Financial Group. While you focus on your roster moves, Western and Southern helps advance your money moves. Buying your first home, planning to start a family, wondering how to make your money grow, Western and Southern's playbook of life insurance, investment, and retirement solutions helps you rest assured on game day. Team up to understand needs and address goals with a game plan built just for toi. Get started at westernsouthern.com/PFF. Okay, so we'll start off here. When the Rams offense has the ball versus the Bengals defense, I'll start only because I had all this fucking information in my brain that I need to like vomit out right now. So some of the stuff I was looking up was like, Rams this season have upped their use of what we'd call trips open formations. So 3-by-1 formations where there's no tight end attached. That will, 2-by-2 or 3-by-1 or even empty. Those are the formations we would call open formations. They have upped that. And what they've also done is up those formations without their receivers being bunched or stacked. So it's really a spread 3-by-1 spread trips open formation. And it's like, and they did it from the start of the season. I have it at like something like over 6 passes, just passes, and not even just runs, just passes per game, about double or like four more per game than really 2019, 2018, 2020. And one of the reasons they've done this is because they don't need to do the bells and whistles anymore, right? Their jet motion rate is down. Obviously, losing Robert Woods in the second half of the season has been part of that, but their jet motion is down. They just want to be a spread team and let Matt Stafford, and we talked about this the whole season, they want to be a spread team and let Matt Stafford just work it. And so the first half of the season, what they're doing is they're lining up as the isolated receiver. They will use the tight end Higbee often, but mostly it's Van Jefferson as that X receiver isolated. You have Cooper Kupp as the slot, as the F, whatever you want to call it. And then obviously the Y is Higbee, to the chip side. And then you have Robert Woods as their version of the Z receiver.
Right.
And so you create combinations between Kupp and Robert Woods, right? So you have just quick high-lows, like, Kupp runs a stick route and here's Woods behind him on like a
clear out or whatever.
Route, right? Like it's not like easy peasy. reads for Stafford, but you put a defender in conflict, and you surround him with your two best players. So then that's their offense. When Woods goes down and you sign Odell Beckham, what happens is Odell Beckham is not a Robert Woods replacement. We understand that he's not a slot receiver. He's
Right. He's not a move guy.
No,
you're not moving him.
He is your classic X receiver. And so instead of just saying, okay, well, we're just going to put him in the Robert Woods role to just copy paste him in that way, obviously, the smart people down there in Los Angeles, they said, okay, well, what we're going to do is Odell Beckham's going to play X. He's going to be isolated. Mm-hmm. Van Jefferson's going to move, and I actually think his role, sorry, not his role, but his play style, I think suits a Z receiver, not a Rams Z receiver.
Right, I was going to say maybe not a McVay in the way that we think about it prior to 2021 Z receiver, but he is a Z receiver.
He's a Z receiver. He's take NFL the top standards. Off. I think of him like, I don't know, going back in time a bit, like a Robert Meacham type of play. Take a top, like he's probably 100%. A little more. Yes. Take the top off defense, run a post route, whatever, that type of thing. Mm-hmm. So now you're in this situation where, okay, well, what we can't do anymore is run these combinations between Woods and Kupp to the 3 receiver side. But what we can do is clear 2 out. Sorry, that's the harsh one. That's a big one. We're going to get that muted. But what we can do is clear 2 people out and let Cooper Kupp to the trip side run a breaking route, an out route, an in route, whatever it may be, to get him isolated somewhere by having a go route and a flat route next to him. That isolates him. And now, instead of on the backside with Van Jefferson running a lot of deeper routes, we have Mr. Odell Beckham winning one-on-ones. Mm-hmm. And specifically talked about it for 100 years on this podcast, the backside dig. Now Stafford can go, okay, if my front side concept isn't there, because a lot of times it is meant really just for Cooper Kupp, I can move my eyes back to Odell Beckham, who is still really, really good. Yeah. He wins one-on-ones. And I don't even want to talk about why it didn't work in Cleveland, but he is a one-on-one player, and he's winning them again. And he's been awesome in the playoffs. So that to me has been, starting from getting Stafford, putting more trips. They've actually been in more trips open formations since they've got Odell has signed with them. So yeah, to me it's been this really, really fascinating transition, like getting Stafford and then having to make that in-season change for Odell Beckham.
Yeah, I mean, and the fact that obviously that move coincides with Woods' injury, right? So like you make a full-on identity swap, like at once. It's not just how do we integrate this guy into the offense. It's also having to bring in a whole new flavor or losing a whole flavor of your offense basically without Woods. One of the things that they've done that you were describing, right, or I'm looking at this from the defensive perspective for Cincinnati, is by putting Kupp in the slot to the trip side and Odell to the X. And it's just weird talking about this. It's not the exact same, but it's so funny having this conversation this February versus last, because we spent all of last year talking about Travis Kelce at X and Tyreek Hill in the slot, right? And the kind of matchup problems that causes. And here we are looking at another offense basically doing a different version of the same thing. But what that does for a team like Cincinnati, right? Like they want to play a decent amount of 2 high, and this is something I'm working on for a preview that'll go up on Friday. When you look at them and how they play split safeties, like one of the things that I expect them to do is to try to get a cloud on Beckham, meaning there's going to be a corner playing in the flats like cover 2 and a safety rolling over the top. Now you can do different things within that cloud. It doesn't have to be some soft cover 2 zone. The corner can run kind of like bump and run with the guy, knowing he's got help over the top. We've talked about different brackets, et cetera, et cetera. But the general idea is if you're using the weak side safety to play over the top of the X receiver, you're basically guaranteeing one-on-ones on the outside to the trip side, right? So for a guy like Cooper Kupp, what that means is now the slot defender, so Mike Hilton, right, more times than not for Cincinnati, is probably going to have to play like outside leverage, or you're going to be playing straight cover 2 across the board. Well, now you're telling Kupp in this offense where they love to use him on option routes, that he's going to get a lot of space to work off of, right? There's not as much traffic for him on some of these in breakers, especially if you're able to eat up the safety or cause some kind of high-low stress between that safety and inside backer, which we know Sean McVay to be pretty good at, even when Goff was there, and certainly now with Stafford in this iteration of the offense. So I'm really interested to see if they are so committed to taking away Beckham, or if Beckham just demands so much attention within the flow of the game that you're left with that as an answer, because that's how you can end up in situations where Cooper Kupp gets that 12, 13 catch type of game, or 12, 13 targets. It doesn't even have to be receptions, but he's getting a large share of the looks because he's just working these slant out options off of one defender, basically. So now what does that open you up to defensively? Now the next thing is like, all right, we got to play tight coverage everywhere, but I want to get some kind of body presence on over Cooper Kupp. So now you're spinning down to like cover one robber, right? Where you're dropping a safety to try to rob that intermediate hole. Well, now you're guaranteeing one-on-ones on the outside. And that puts a lot of strain on an Eli Apple, right? That's where you can draw up some of those designer plays where you get Van Jefferson on those double moves where he's chopping and going up the sideline, right? Or you can work on the backside with those glance routes to Odell instead of Diggs, right? Where you can really push it down the field. So
comeback routes.
Like, exactly. Like, that's just kind of the interplay to me from a coverage perspective. For Cincy, one of the things that they like to do if they're really feeling strained on both ends is just to plague Tampa too, right? And that's another viable way to play defense. It's not the worst idea in the world. It just, again, you're creating now vertical stress, trying to take away all those short in breakers that you might get, in or out breakers that you get from Cooper Kupp and Tyler Higbee. So again, to the point of creating those designer opportunities for downfield shots. It's something that we've been talking about all year long, basically, and I think that we're going to get a pretty good look from a great play caller in Sean McVay in terms of, hey, if they're going to show me X, I'm going to respond to this with Y. And then if their adjustment is this, what we're building off of what I'm showing them with Y is going to turn into adjustment Z over the top, or with screens, or working a particular mismatch. So that to me is like one of the things I'm really interested in. And then obviously, like, one of the things that the Bengals have really struggled with is play action. So I think it's going to be a high priority for them to make sure that on early downs, the Rams, if they're not in the gun, or well, I guess they do run the ball out of the gun too, so you still have to be on alert for it. But you got to stop the run on first down, or you can't give away layups on first down. Because even when they're in quarters, one thing that they struggle with is fitting the run and then dealing with play action, because they ask so much of their linebackers to get to the first level to help them out. So all that intermediate stuff, like, there's just a lot of danger for me dealing with this Rams offense. It's not particular to the Bengals, but because they can do so much out of the gun in terms of running the ball and then creating these matchup problems like we were talking about with the Chiefs last year, like, it puts you in a bind defensively. Last year, what we saw from Tampa Bay was them basically saying, we're never going to play single high ever again against the Chiefs, right? Like, they basically only played cover 3 out of that 3 high safety look, and rolled down late. And it was like no cover 1 at all. I'm interested to see if the Bengals try to do something similar. Where it's like, hey, it's all quarters, and then if it's trips, we're going from quarters to quarter, half, right? And then trying to live in a world where you can deal with one-on-ones on the inside with Kupp, or one-on-ones on the outside with Odell. So that's what I'm looking at in terms of a matchup.
You know, and one of the issues, and the thing that Tampa Bay got, like, the Tampa Bay game plan, like, we put it in the Hall of Fame. Like, wow, they played all this quarter, half, and they played all this too high stuff, and it's like, great. I think that they had to do that. I'm not saying they didn't have to do that, but it was multiplied by the D-line versus offensive line.
By the pass rush, yes.
You know, this Rams offensive line has played really great the whole season. You know what I mean? There's been some dips in form there, but like over the course of the season, they played
and really particularly good. In the postseason, they've played really, really well.
I don't think Whitworth had his best game against Nick Bosa 2 weeks ago. Mm-hmm. I don't think Trey Henderson is Nick Bosa. I think Trey Henderson is very good. I'm not saying he's not. He's not Nick Bosa. So if you can mitigate that situation, in it, then that becomes tough. Then Stafford's got time to make all these plays, and he's got time to work these underneath one-on-ones. Which, you know, and again, going back to the Super Bowl last year, like this Rams team. The last year's Chiefs team was great at so many things, but as we saw this season, one of the things they weren't great at is quick precision passing. They're not a weak side option team. They're not a Cooper Kupp option team, right?
Right.
The Rams are. Right. So that's, you know, and again, it's hard to find these scenarios. The Rams offense has been so freaking good the past 3 weeks, and it might not have seen that on the scoreboard because they've had these really bad fumbles and they've had these really bad interceptions, tip ball interception. But like they've been so good, and everything is coming together at the right time for them. Finally kind of integrating Odell Beckham and figuring out what he's good at, and him becoming a real player again. Like that's so yeah. That to me is a scary thing. You want to start playing all these too high structures. The Rams can kill you. Like the way they play can kill a team specifically when you allow them to isolate your Mike linebacker, who's not Fred Warner. Right. And you know what I mean? Like it's very.
And again, it's no disrespect to say that, but you have to identify the fact that they don't have a dude like that. And when you don't have a dude like that, it does open up a lot of areas of stress in coverage for you.
Yeah, 100%. Like I don't even then you're in a situation where you're trying to play a little bit more dime. I don't know, than nickel.
Maybe
I don't even. That's tough for them too because what did you just say? They will run the ball from gun.
Right.
They will just run.
And if they get any success for them in the run game, particularly because they have two running backs that are basically still nursing like these lower leg injuries, basically just not 100%. But if they can manufacture any level of run game, that's really trouble. And then the other thing for me, and this is something that we've seen McVay do this postseason and obviously over the stretch of his tenure as a head coach with the Rams, is like the little things to steal yards, right? Like tempo changes. That's something that they use to try to neutralize pass rush is tempo changes. You use screen game to steal yards and neutralize pass rush as well. So I'm interested to see, how they kind of mix in, do they want to go to more like the Cooper Cup tunnel screens that we've seen work really well, if they don't have the run game working, or if they just want to get the ball out on the perimeter. Like there are a lot of options for them based on what the Bengals do defensively. And this does not mean that the Bengals have zero answers, right? It's just a matter of you got to win the one-on-ones. There's only so much you can do to try to escape these one-on-one scenarios that the Rams can create with their two best receivers. And really the only way that you can do that out of a too-high structure, in my opinion, with the way that they play defense, is to ask your Mike backer to basically handle anything vertically from number 3 or up the middle of the field. And that's a tough ask. It's just a tough ask, especially because of the amount of speed and space that they can play with when they're all spread out. So if their Mike backer plays out of their mind, hey, anything can happen. And I'm kind of past the point now of acting like these things can't happen because I 100% watched it last year when I thought that the Bucks were dead in the water walking into the stadium. So, out of respect to them, I'm not going to say it's an impossibility, but if you're asking me genuinely how I feel about it, no, I don't think that this is the greatest matchup on the interior between Hilton and what they have with their safeties room. I think that Bates is fine, but he's not going to be able to cover the amount of ground that he did even against Kansas City as they kind of made their adjustments in the second half.
I wanted to bring up the two safeties, Von Bell and Jesse Bates, who are two really good players.
Yes.
However, they don't need to work what they were doing a lot in that Kansas City game was looking like they're going to play too high, post snap rotating down one of the guys into a robber situation. The Rams, while they will run like a crossing route here and there, certainly off play action, and then part of their four verts package from trips, but for the most part, they don't need those routes like the Chiefs need those routes.
Mm-hmm.
They can bypass you and play to the outside if they need to. So like now you're rotating and this guy's being kind of wasted. Let's say it's Von Bell coming down, like Von Bell's being wasted in the middle of the field, trying to be this robber for all these routes that are breaking out. Your comeback from Beckham and your sail route from Cup, right? Like that they can do that whenever they need it.
Mm-hmm.
So I think like what's the best position group for the Bengals? It's either safeties or edge rushers, right? They can just bypass it.
Yeah.
So that again, it just scares me. It's hard. Like, look, I want to see Joe Burrow win a Super Bowl. Obviously, you guys know I'm biased about that stuff. Jamar Chase as well. It's tough. It's tough to find a lot of paths, and we haven't even talked about when the Bengals have the football.
I'd say we haven't even gotten to the other end yet.
Like it is tough to find a path forward that they have that that really looks like them stopping the Rams offense. That doesn't include tips and interceptions and forced fumbles, which they've been doing. Kudos to them. But I think on like a play-by-play basis, it's tough. It's tough. That's all I'm gonna say. It's tough.
Yeah, I mean it is, and again, none of this is to say that it can't happen. But when you start talking about pathways, the way that we're, at least I can assume for you that you're looking at it similarly to me. When we talk about pathways, it's not like do they have enough to win? We're talking about the Super Bowl, man. These are the two teams that are left. Of course, there's an opportunity to win. I just don't think that it would be as comfortable for Cincinnati. All the way that I think about where they can win, it's all like, oh, well, you do this, and then, you're holding on by 3 points at the end of the game. You're holding on by 5 or 6 points at the end of the game, right? Like, whereas for the Rams, especially when we get to the other side of the ball, I think that there's an opportunity for them to play a little bit more comfortably. And this is one of the few opportunities that they have to see a team that plays a style of football that kind of lends itself to the way that I think the Rams kind of want to play on both sides of the ball anyways. And that's where I get really uncomfortable on Cincinnati's behalf. For you, like, if we're going to play out the thought experiment of how would Lou Anarumo and this defense pull off something similar to what Todd Bowles did last year, what does that look like? Like, I'm obviously kind of writing this stuff out, so I'm already in brainstorm mode with this. But on your end, what would that look like for you?
It probably
would it be Hendrickson that looks like having.
Okay, yeah. First thing, Trey Hendrickson, Sam Hubbard, making plays.
Right, DJ and BJ. 100%. Yeah.
Yeah. It might mean them like Odell Beckham not have, like, being a Cleveland Brown again.
Yeah.
And just like either Stafford not seeing it or not trusting it, or which he has. So like, especially in the playoffs, or him just like not getting open on one-on-one scenarios.
Right.
Because like you said, once they play too high, Kupp is the guy, man. And he's already the guy.
Yeah.
But once you play too high, you give him the option route. Not even talking about chips, but 2x2, and you give them the option route. Because what they'll do is they'll stack OBJ and Kupp. OBJ runs the corner, and here's a little option route, and it's crazy. No one can stop this.
Yeah, you're cooked, man. Like, it's not just, they've done it to everybody all year long, particularly in the postseason.
Yeah. So like, once they get into those situations, being able to hold up on the outside one-on-one, even on the other side, with Van Jefferson, whoever, I don't know who's going to play against who, Eli Apple and Shadobi Awuzie, but like, just get winning those. And then that at least allows you the opportunity to double, quote unquote double Cooper Kupp on the intermediate levels of the field from the slot, like once you spin down there. So I think that, is obviously a way to do it.
I mean,
there's a cop out.
If you're out, if you're out of answers,
no, but the one thing is Stafford just having
one of those Stafford days. Yeah,
you know what I mean. Jaquiski Tart, like, not dropping the ball type of thing,
right.
Like that type of thing. The Rams maybe getting. It's so funny we don't even talk about the Rams play action game anymore, because it's like it's not interesting anymore. Like, we've seen it for 3 years, and they've gone. Yeah. Like, they're not not being able to hit those double moves to Van Jefferson, who runs the corner post, because they stayed in too high, and Bates and Von Bell distributed those over routes really nicely off play action. That would be another thing that would I think help them. Like, it's like one of those things that obviously you're gonna play too high, you got to stop the run.
Right.
If you can do that, then you can start playing around and nailing down on certain routes with good leverage when you're playing too high with the safety. So those are my things. I do think it probably starts with Stafford just throwing a boneheaded couple picks.
I mean, that's where I'm at with it. Like, and it's tied to Odell as well. Like, whether it's Hendrickson in the pass rush or their ability to win the one-on-ones on the backside, they've got to do something to take Odell as an option away, to where, as a defense, our main priority from this point on is just flooding Cooper Kupp's side of the field with coverage bodies, right? Or bracketing Kupp if it comes down to that, and that's what you have to do. That, to me, is like the number one priority for this defense. Is you got to find a way to win with Beckham, because if you're gonna get a team that plays a lot of 3-by-1 with the real dude as an X, and you find a way to handle that, it does so much for your defense. And that, to me, I mean, that's the game. And it's not just them. This is actually, we're going to have the exact same conversation on the other end of the ball with Jamar Chase and Jalen Ramsey. So it's not just them, but that's really it. Whether it's by pass rush and forcing Matthew Stafford's eyes down or to one side of the field, or they just win those coverage matchups, whether it's with a double team or a safety rolled over the top, or Eli Apple is able to kind of stand tall on the outside against Odell, or Chidobe Awuzie is able to stand tall on the outside against Odell, then hey, now we're talking about a different football game. I've just seen so much tape now of LA continually getting themselves into situations where they know they're getting the one-on-one on the backside and they have the route to beat it. And if it's not there, then you know that they're working the option route to Cup, and that's probably open. So I would have to see it. That's something that I'm not willing to go out and predict what happened right out the gate in this game.
All right, before we head over to the other side of the ball, just a reminder that roses are red, violets are blue, and you shouldn't let a wild pube wreck you. Valentine's Day is just around the corner, and our sponsors at Manscaped are here for you with the best tools to get your skin ready for the special occasion. This V-Day, it's time to join the 4 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped, the leaders in below-the-waist grooming. With our exclusive offer, go to manscaped.com and use promo code PFF for 20% off and free shipping. The holidays went by so quickly. Did you remember to take care of your package with the best tools for the job? The Performance Package 4.0 from Manscaped is just the thing everybody needs in their life to make each and every day a little more special. Manscaped created the products for a night just like Valentine's Day and will make your V-Day date say, wow, great skin you have there. Get 20% off and free shipping with promo code PFF at manscaped.com. That's 20% off with free shipping at manscaped.com and use promo code PFF. Join Cupid and shoot your arrow with Manscaped this Valentine's Day season. All right.
That shoot your arrow pun might be their worst in terms of the ad read funds. That was uncomfortable.
Everything about me reading is uncomfortable, I think.
Yeah, maybe it's you. Maybe it's not me. Let me not put it on our ad partners. I'll blame Seth for that.
Okay, let's switch over to when the Bengals have the ball. And I'll start like I did with the other side of the ball. I'll take you through my thought process. A little word vomit right now. So the Rams hire Brandon Staley in 2020 to run their defense. Got to go back all the way there.
Yeah,
he puts in this kind of for the NFL, a kind of new style 3-4 defense that a lot of college teams are running. That I think he did in college before he became an NFL assistant coach. Mm-hmm. He has a certain way of doing it. He gets the head coaching job for the Chargers in the offseason. They bring in Raheem Morris, who's been around the league a long time, as a an interim head coach, as a DC, as a position coach on offense and defense, like the whole thing, right?
Yeah.
So what it seems like when I watch them is you have a lot of the Brandon Staley-isms, but maybe on a surface level basis. Mm-hmm. And it feels like Sean McVay said, I would love to get to the bottom of this, but it does feel like Sean McVay said, hey, like what we did last year was really, really good. It is the future of defense. So here's the first 15 pages of Brandon Staley's playbook, and you gotta run it. Like this is what I need you to run. And so what they've ended up doing, which is very different, relatively different than Brandon Staley's, they will play with 5 defensive linemen on the field on early downs, like on pretty much all the time, right? Like it's a very high rate of that. Mm-hmm. And Brandon Staley was kind of okay living in a quote-unquote 5-1 box because they want to play with 2 high safeties. Now, the Bucs, on the other hand, are a good example of a team that says, we want to play with 5 defensive linemen on the field, but we want to also play with 2 linebackers on the field because obviously they have 2 really good linebackers. Well, they have 1.5 really good linebackers. So, fuck. So, 5-1 box, right?
Right.
And then Staley, what I thought was really good at was, okay, I have this structure. It is a 3-4. We can play with 5 defensive linemen, but we can also like mix it up and say, hey, we're playing a team that throws the football a lot. Here's a regular 4-2 defense. And hey, we're playing against an RPO team. Here's tight front with no edge defenders, or at least on one side, no C-gap defender. So you can play around with it. What Staley's done, what Morris has done this year is really be kind of rigid in like we are playing with 5 down defensive linemen, 1 linebacker, and if we need another player at the secondary level, it is a safety that is going to spin down late. Okay.
Yes, sir.
It's been okay for them. It's been a lot better when they said, hey, we're going to trade for Von Miller, and all we're going to do is say, hey, Terrell Lewis, you used to play edge linebacker for us, or outside linebacker, edge rusher for us. Instead of that, we're going to do the same exact thing, but we're going to play a future Hall of Famer there. That's been pretty good for them, I'd say.
Yeah.
So that is where that to me has been, where the difference is between 2020 Rams defense, which was one of the top defenses in the league, and they did lose some players in the offseason, and some other players have regressed, but to Rams 2021, they're in the Super Bowl, by the way. That's been the big difference. And one of the things you really see, I think, is like Morris saying, I'm not comfortable with this very much. And on early downs, he doesn't love having a 5-1 box and playing quarters behind it or quarter half behind it. He's saying, this 5-1 box freaks me out a little bit, and I get that. So I'm going to spin down to cover 3 a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And their cover 3 rate on early downs has gone up like 25%. Like, it's crazy, the difference. So that is the global aspect of the Rams defense. Have I missed anything before we get into the matchup?
No, I mean, if you're laying out the structure, I mean, that's exactly it. And I think that was exactly what we joked about before the season, right? It was that Sean McVay was going to walk right up to Raheem Morris and say, congratulations on being hired. Here are the plays that I'm telling you that you're running defensively. We're going to do the things that worked now between last year and this year. And one of the things that has been really interesting to me is like almost the point you were making about what Staley was willing to do in terms of, hey, this offense does X, so all we're going to do in response within our structure is Y, right? We're only going to play, like, and we saw this with the Chargers this year, right? The first time they played the Chiefs and beat them, we came in here and were like, oh, they just played one cross all game. They played one robber all game long, and that happened to handle what it was that Kansas City was doing.
Not to add, we don't need to add to this, but I remember also us talking about the first time they played the Raiders.
Yes.
And they said, hey, we're going to play cover 3 because we know what level of defense you want to attack.
Exactly. And we're not leaving it, right? We're not going to leave this. So
cover 3 from a 4 down front.
Right, from a 4 down front. And
yes.
We talked about the tight front. I've written about this with Staley before, like on a week by week basis, man, you can see any one of these things. With Raheem Morris, I think that because, and I do think that there is an argument to be made that the loss of like John Johnson and Will Hill and like Troy Hill and all the guys that they had in the defensive backfield does take away from what this defense was, because there is a certain amount of value in a guy like John Johnson being able to play in between safety and backer on a given snap. That does a lot for a team that wants to play with 5 guys at the line of scrimmage. You have to make up that loss of an intermediate level player. So for me, like, I think the only other thing that I would add is that what do you do when you're missing players like that? You end up doing what Raheem Morris is doing, which is like, man, I'm just not really comfortable playing too high, like traditional too high with 5 down, in this spacing in nickel personnel. So now what are you doing? You're rolling a safety down to play like a buzz position and turn it back into like a 5-2 box or close to it, right? Or a 4-2 box, I guess, if you're dropping one of the edge rushers, which would usually be Leonard Floyd, out into the flat.
Well,
so you're getting back into a balanced defense, basically.
Yeah. I looked this up recently, so I'll give you the stats now. Well, now, of course, I don't have the numbers right in front of me, but I'll give you the gist, right? So in 2.5 seasons leading up to Von Miller's trade, so 19, 20, and then half of 21, Von Miller dropped in coverage 61 times. You know how many times he's done that since he's become a Ram? 50 times.
I was going to guess that he probably equaled the number.
So, and then, yeah, to your point, like that's what they were going to do. They're like saying, okay, we're going to drop either Leonard Floyd or Von Miller off because, like, I need bodies.
Yeah, gotta have them. Gotta have bodies. So that has been, that's just been an interesting thing throughout the year. Structurally outside of that in this season, that kind of that stuck out to me is to the point about being a collection of calls. There's really not a clear rhyme or reason for what pops up for them defensively and when it does, to me at least, because they're missing, I think, some of the elements in terms of adjustments within this defense. So like we've talked, off air about the times that they play bracket or just play quarters with an outside leverage nickel instead of like your typical quarters. And then obviously, we'll talk about Jalen Ramsey and the fact that he's basically the only DB that they have that is like a plus run fitter for a team that wants to live in nickel, and some of the decisions that you kind of have to make when your best corner is also like your best defensive back in terms of run support. So I think that also takes away from some of the versatility that I think that you would like to have for the bodies that they have available to them defensively. But yeah, I mean, you basically touched on all of it in terms of what to expect from like a pre-snap picture perspective. For you in watching the Bengals on offense, how do you think that they're going to respond to that before I kind of say how I was feeling about this matchup?
Well, I hope they don't. So it's funny you talk about like when you play in too high, all of a sudden your nickels got to be run fitters and stuff like that because, or like you said, John Johnson's got to be a hybrid type of player. He's got to be in the run fit like we saw against the Packers in the playoff game last year or throughout the whole season. Mm-hmm. They get away with it. And do you know why they get away with it? Aaron Donald,
99,
Greg Gaines, Deshaun Robinson,
yeah.
Von Miller, and Leonard Floyd, right?
Yeah.
When you got those bodies, you can get away with a lot of
It's
stuff.
a ridiculous combination of 5 guys to have
I
at
can't
the line of
believe
scrimmage.
this, man.
It's ridiculous.
It makes no sense. So my thing, and I wrote about it on PFF.com. We probably talked about it already, but you have to find. So yes, that is an insane collection of talent, and it is better than the Bengals offensive line individually 100 times a day, right? Like Hakeem Adeniji versus Aaron Donald is no good. It's
just
good.
not. It's not. There's
not
no way to work around that. There is no cute way to try to explain it. It's a horrid matchup.
Yes,
for Cincinnati.
And so when you play with 5 down defensive linemen, hard to double anybody, right? Mm-hmm. But I'm like, wait a minute. Because of the way Morris wants to play it, when they put those 5 down on the field, you have the opportunity now to dictate space in the second and third level of defense. So if they want to play with 5 down and rush 5 with a 5-1 box, now you have the middle, kind of like we talked about with Cooper Kupp on the other side against the Bengals linebackers. But like now you have a lot of room in the middle, buddy. A whole bunch of room in the middle for your quick games, for your Tyler Boyd,
in breakers, levels, concepts, all of those types of things.
And I saw Mina Kimes, former guest of the Too High podcast, Mina Kimes, talk about how their like passer rating allowed or their EPA per play allowed, the Rams defense on throws like between the numbers in the intermediate level is one of the worst in the league. And we know this because of what we're talking about their structure and how they're going to leave space between their Mike linebacker, Troy Reader. So that's number one. Like you can bypass the pass rush by getting the ball off quickly, right? That would be, you're not going to stop the pass rush. Like, sorry, it's not going to happen. But you can bypass it by getting the ball out quickly in those areas. And then then there's that. The next thing is what they're going to do is stay in that 5-1 box, but they're going to drop either Von Miller or Leonard Floyd. Those are the guys you got to exploit. Because they're dropping from the line of scrimmage. They're not dropping in a zone from already at 5 yards. Like they're dropping from the line of scrimmage. You can attack that. Again, just put those 2 players in a bind because they don't want to be pass droppers, right? And the third thing is, and this is getting into the receiver versus DB battle, which is to a certain degree going to make or break the game. Because, like I said, they will spin to one high to protect that middle of the field underneath. Then you got to take your shot. T. Higgins versus Darius Williams. Period. That's got to happen. Has to. So yeah, that's my answer.
So I mean, you kind of teed me up because now the matchup that we're talking about, like you said, like the issues that they're going to have up front, they just are what they are. There's no way around that. Like I don't have some pretty explanation for what you can do, especially because of CJ Uzama's knee Like they've been swearing up and down that he's not going to miss a game. He keeps saying like, I'm obviously not going to miss an opportunity to play in the Super Bowl. So it's not that I don't think that he's going to be on the active roster, but you're talking about an MCL sprain. I don't care what freak drugs they try to pump into this man's knee. You're just not going to be as productive off of an MCL sprain from 2 weeks ago. So without him and knowing that Drew Sample is not as big of a target in the passing game, that's where it becomes really important that you stretch the intermediate areas of the field. You have to make them respect what's going on between the hashes with the T. Higgins. So anytime that you get that matchup, to me, Joe Burrow's number one job on Sunday is going to be finding Darius Williams and making sure you're working the end of the progression where Darius Williams is. It's not to disrespect his ability as a corner. I think he's been okay. He just gets targeted more now. Now that they have, less good coverage players, I think, to cover for some of the warts that he does have at times. So, but you got to work him, and it's just got to be away from Jalen Ramsey. So, to me, the thing that I'm looking for on a snap by snap basis is whether or not Ramsey is inside or out. And I'm working on this now, and we talked about this when we did our Super Bowl prep a week ago. But a lot of this is going to be predicated on whether or not Raheem Morris is willing to just put Jalen outside. Like, a lot of what they're going to get from a game plan perspective is going to be based on that, because I don't think that you're going to get the same amount of single high from them, obviously, as you saw when they played the Niners. I think you're going to see a lot of split safety, and when you do that and you play Jalen outside with Chase one-on-one, now that frees you up for an Eric Weddle or whoever your weak side safety is to play over towards the strong side. Now, when you talk about, like, mitigating those issues in that intermediate area, that makes it a lot easier on Troy Reeder as far as playing with a certain amount of depth, right? Now he doesn't have to be so concerned with, I've got something high and something low in front of me, and T. Higgins is the high route. Now I really got to be concerned about that, right? Or there's this wide open area on this over-the-ball check down route that I know I need to squeeze down on, but damn it, their second best receiver is behind me running a dig. How am I supposed to negotiate this space? If you can use that weak side safety to add into that to be a layer of coverage, now you have a high player and a low player in the intermediate area, which is kind of like best case scenario for them. When Jalen is not outside with Chase, now you run into the issues of, all right, we got to roll a safety over the top if that's where Darius Williams is. Like, you just have to. You absolutely have to. Otherwise, Chase is going for 180 yards and 2 touchdowns because of just how efficient they've been with their downfield passing game to Chase. And if that happens, now you're talking about Ramsey in the slot, which is good for the particular matchup of him versus Higgins. I think Ramsey wins that more times than not.
And versus Boyd, too.
Right, and versus Boyd, if Boyd is in the slot as well. Like, I like that matchup for them. So that, again, the interplay with what are you doing with Ramsey and how that changes your two high coverages in response. Like, for them, I think, if I'm going to guess, I think they start the game with Ramsey inside. Is what I think they're going to do. I think they're going to start the game with Ramsey inside and say, can we live in a world where the middle of the field is more open because we're rolling help over the top for Chase and just saying, hey, Jalen, I need you to erase this slot. And we're going to try to play as much coverage as we can to the trip side with these 4 defenders and just ask Reeder to try to negotiate that space. But the second it becomes an issue, in the middle of the field, whether it's in breakers, your dagger concepts, et cetera, where they're just trying to waste whoever Jalen Ramsey is covering and break something inside underneath them. That's when I think you'll see Ramsey get moved out. So I think that'll kind of be like a first half. Expect to see Ramsey inside a decent amount. And then by the second half, if it's a tight game especially, or on third downs, any key passing situation, that's when you're going to see Ramsey kick back outside, and now you're going to see them play like cover 2 to the trip side like we talked about with Staley, where that backside safety gets to drop in and take any crossers coming back across the field.
The issue for the Bengals, I think, is you're going to get this 5-1 box, too high 5-1 box. Can you run the football?
No, that's the issue. Well, you can run the ball. You can run the ball. The issue is you only run the ball out of one goddamn formation, one personnel grouping, and you're always under center for it. So if you're going to tell a good run-fitting team and a Raheem Morris that probably wants to be in single high anyways, if you're going to give him the look that he wants and allow him to spin down and load the box where now both B-gaps are closed because you're in an odd front, you got good edge presence, and you're rolling and loading the box with the safety, I don't know what the hell you're going to do in the run game against that.
they need to find this balance of like keeping like because once the Rams decide you're throwing the ball too much, we're gonna take Ashawn Robinson off the field, who's a really good player, but we're gonna take him off the field and we're just gonna play with 4 down. And even though like on a player by player basis, if they bring in Trayvon Howard as the second linebacker versus Ashawn Robinson as their one of their interior defensive linemen, Ashawn Robinson's a better player,
right?
But
it's more valuable to have another intermediate, second level defender if you're going to pass all the time.
If they're going to pass all the time. So like the Bengals have to find this fucking weird balance of we need to at least make them think we're going to run the football.
Yeah.
And not do it at the rate that they've been doing it in the playoffs. Like they had changed their whole thing, the second half of the season, they're throwing the ball in early downs, they're letting Burrow cook. And then they go back in the playoffs, and it's like, oh, we're going to run the football. And
first
honestly,
down,
the offense
every first
hasn't
down
been
we're
good.
getting it off.
The offense hasn't been very good.
Yeah.
They've gotten defense has played really good, and the offense has gotten some big plays and big situations, but like they haven't really been playing very good as a whole. So like, it's got to find that balance, and it's not 50%. It's less than 50%, but it's wherever that number is, where it's like. They're going to keep their 5 defensive linemen on the field, and those are and you can just bypass them with quick game, either quick game, like actual quick game, slants and sticks and quick ins, like we saw at the end of the Chiefs game, or you bypass them with, hey, they spun to one high, 1, 2, 3, throw the outside.
Yep.
Comeback, not even comeback route. I mean, stop route, back shoulder route, or an over the top 9 ball.
Yeah, I mean, and while you were talking, I was going back to look, and it is funny tracking this, pulling up their first down runs, and you can see, like, early in the year, kind of want to run the ball on first down. Then I think that they recognize by, like, the latter stretch of the year, like, this is not feasible. We got we got to do something else. And then you get back in the playoffs, and particularly against the Chiefs, it's like, we're going to run the ball on every first down, basically. Like, I don't get that. I don't get that, and I think that will be poor form for them on Sunday. The goal is, if you're going to run the ball, that you run it on 2nd and 3, right? So you can avoid the third downs where now you have to worry about where is Ramsey? Is Ramsey going to be lined up on the side of the progression that we really wanted to work? And now we got to work away from him where we know they're going to be sending all the coverage bodies anyways. Like, that's the issue, is that you can't just walk in and hand away first down by getting into 12 personnel and under center outside zone. Because if the Chiefs can recognize that and tee off on you, God knows what a real, actual good run defense is going to do to the same tendency. For you, so again, like if we're going to kind of suss out what this might look like or try to guess what this looks like, if the Bengals have a great day offensively, what is the key factor for you? Is it going to be early down passes? Or is there another factor maybe that you're looking at that they can kind of break this game open or maybe keep it close?
Again, the 2 cop-out answers are very obvious here. Joe Burrow makes plays outside the pocket.
Right.
Which we know he can do. Chase wins the one-on-one with Ramsey. Look, we haven't seen this. Let me pause here and ask you before we get out of here. What does the Chase Ramsey battle look like one-on-one? It's fun, right?
That is great. I mean, it's like one of those, like, I'll be going back on YouTube to go watch it, later on in the offseason if we get a bunch of it. I guess it's fascinating for me, and we talked about this a little bit, last week, I want to say, but in terms of like physical skill sets, you probably can't make a better corner in a lab for who Chase likes to be down the field in terms of physicality. But still, we're talking about a value that Chase can add if you get a PI from Ramsey on like a 35-yard target. There's just as much value in that as just winning the jump ball itself, obviously, especially in this game. And I think if you're Cincinnati, you're almost playing more to like, we just want to win like half of those.
Yes.
If you win half of those, I can't even describe the amount of value that gives you defensively, right? Because you want to create the bind for Raheem Morris and the rest of this defense to say like, well, shit, man, if they can play us even with our best coverage defender and their best receiver, and we've got these other issues that we got to sort out, because like you said, you have to make these decisions between, do we want our best 11 or our most valuable defensive structure on the field based on what we're getting? Now you can really put this defense in as much of a bind as you can. So I'm with you on that in terms of how how this thing might play out. But yeah, I think that if we're going to look at it from a snap by snap basis, I mean, I would just love to see it. I think in terms of physicality, if you're Cincinnati, you want that down the field as much as possible. It's not going to be slants and in breakers and digs like that. You want it as vertical as possible if Ramsey is going to be there. And to the points that I think that you were making, I think that you also have to tell Burrow, if we go 3-by-1 and we see that weak safety rolling down like he's trying to rob.
You don't have to tell Burrow that. He knows.
Take it.
You know what kind of player he
exactly.
is.
You have to take it. It doesn't matter that number 5 is their best player. Yeah. You got to take it anytime you get it, no matter who's covering him. Again, because of the value that it adds, and you have to put some kind of strain on this defense. You have to make them make a decision on, we just got to have a safety over the top because they're going to keep taking the throw. And, if they win 2 or 3 of those, that might be enough for them to win a game.
And then the last thing is, I would say, 2 things. Play action, wadding it up, 7-man protection, which they don't really do.
I was going to say, so I'm looking now at their 5-man pass pro on Ultimate, and they were 5th in the amount of times that they had 5-man pass pro. You want to know what their pressure rate was? 28%.
Oh, boy.
Gave them pressure on like 28, 29%, and I think their pass blocking grade is like below 60. So we're not talking about, the best idea against this unit, especially if you get those odd front looks where they can put Miller and Donald on the same side, and you can't help on either. It's tough. And now what that's doing is eliminating Joe Mixon as a pass catching threat, right? Because now he's got to stay in and help. You really can't afford to release him out into the route.
You see teams, I think the Cardinals did it in the playoffs, where it's like, we're not releasing our back. He's not even a check release, freaking Mike to Sam. He's
right.
He's
you're helping the edge rusher, or
yeah, and then you're helping your guard and tackle.
Yeah,
like you're just gonna stand there and like when it's not even if, it's like when Aaron Donald beats your guard, at least you're standing there.
Yeah,
like that's what the I remember the Cardinals doing this in the playoffs, or maybe in the regular season. I don't remember, but yeah, that's so yeah. I think it's got to be a big, if it's not going to be a Chase winning those games, those matchups, T and Boyd, man,
it's got to be
and maybe. Mixon in the run game, like we don't love the matchup O-line versus D-line. Mixon's a good player. He spins away from someone and gets 25 yards. Yep. You know what I mean? Like
get him out on the perimeter, see if he can make a guy miss. Like you do have to try something in the run game, but to your point, I just don't think it needs to be on first down. And like I said, anytime you identify a one-on-one with Chase, you have to take it 100% of the time, no matter how it turns out. For the Rams, how do you, on average, how do you think this plays out for them defensively? Like, do you like this matchup, I think, as much as I do, in terms of what the Rams do defensively versus what the Bengals like to do? And is it just because of what they are up front?
I would like structurally versus structurally, if we take the Bengals, what they were doing the second half of the season, I like the Bengals.
I do too.
The second you talk to me about that pass rush against the offensive line, I don't like it anymore.
I'm out. Yeah, I'm out. Like, it's really just that simple. It's just that simple. Until any conversation we have before we consider personnel, I'm 100% with you. I love this matchup for Cincinnati and what they do offensively. But as soon as just mentioning Aaron Donald alone kind of has me halfway out the door. And then you throw in the fact that you have to deal with the multiples of who's coming between Floyd and Miller. Now I'm really like, I just don't like it. I don't like the matchup. And like I said, I just don't think that there's a workaround for it based on pressure. And I am not making the mistake of thinking for 2 years in a row that the quarterback that continues to escape pressure and extend plays better than anybody is just going to beat the pass rush just because. Like, I've watched this happen too many times in these games. And I can't look away from what this pass rush might be able to do to this offensive line.
Burrow is the most important player in this game by far.
On both sides of the ball. Yeah.
Not even close. It's not even close. Like, if he is that player and he's escaping pressure and he's making plays with his legs, like, I would say if the offense looks like the last 2 drives against the Chiefs, even though they only got field goals on those drives, because
I know.
It's not like they were great on those 2 drives, but if they look like those 2 drives, then I think they can. It could be okay. All right. Speaking of halfway out the door, we're out of here.
Yeah.
I don't want to ask you for your prediction.
I was going to say, well, I'm not asking you a score prediction. I don't want to ask you a score
I
prediction.
don't want to do that, and I think you can listen to this podcast and understand where we
Well,
are.
let me
on both sides.
So let's sign out on this then. I had an interesting question I've been thinking about asking you. So tell me, either team winning, what do you think is going to be your major takeaway from the season, right? Because we all retroactively apply these narratives based on the result, particularly in the Super Bowl. But if the Bengals were to win, what's the big takeaway from you based on their season? And then if the Rams were to, what's the takeaway for you in that situation?
Off the top of my head, these are going to be not great answers, but
Of course,
Bengals winning is just all about regression to the mean. 2020, they were like the worst deep ball throwing team of all time.
yeah,
And it was many factors, and I wrote about it last offseason, many factors. It was just never, and you could talk about Burrow's arm strength and blah, 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 blah. It was just never going to be that bad again. And then you've gone in the complete opposite other way because you've added Jamar Chase and his ability. Because like Burrow's been better with T. Higgins. Now T. Higgins in the second year in the league, getting a full offseason, blah, blah, blah. But like he's even been better with other players throwing them deep. So that to me, like the regression from all the way one side to the other side has been great, because Burrow was really good under 20 yards as a rookie, before getting the injury. So we knew that. We knew if Burrow was going to hit in the NFL, he was going to be that good under 20 yards. And then I guess the other side, again, it's a cop out. It's find your quarterback to make life easier for you. Yep. You know the answer. Anyways, you?
For me, Bengals win. I think that my main takeaway to your point is just like the same way we were talking about Josh Allen in a way, right? Regression to the mean for these spread out offenses with quarterbacks that have to create a bunch for themselves. Like that's the conversation to me. Obviously, I mean, the conversation is put to bed already, but I do think that what the Bengals are doing does open the door to have conversations about like what the value is for particular talents with skill positions versus particular talents in terms of in the trenches, right? Between Sewell and Chase and all of that. And that doesn't mean it's going to be a one-to-one conversation the next time there's a team that has a need at tackle and a need at receiver. But I do think that this is an interesting data point to use for reference in the future. For the Rams, to your point, I mean, the easiest one is just that Matt Stafford, right? Big legacy thing for him, going out, shooting your shot, getting the quarterback when you know you have the opportunity to do so. And obviously, having the wide receiver talent, again, to create this certain types of pressure on defenses, especially in the era of too high coverages. Like, that's kind of how I'm opening up my little preview, is just talking about how, like, for Cincinnati, like, they played 353 snaps where they showed two high safeties and played a two high safety shell, right? Didn't rotate. This year, they ranked 22nd with those 353 snaps. If you go back the last 5 seasons, you want to guess where they would rank? Top 10 at four out of the five seasons prior to this. They'd be in the top 10. So 15% jump between last year and this year in terms of two high shells shown and played. So again, like we're just walking into a different era, which we talked about this defensively, and we're going to continue to talk about the offensive response to it in terms of how do your priorities change when the defensive structure changed, because we have data now to suggest that it's not just, hey, we're trending and playing more split safety coverages. Like you can legitimately make the argument that NFL defense kind of changed overnight between like 2018 and 2019 to 2020 and 2021.
It's craziness.
Yeah, ridiculous.
And I think we both saw it coming, because there's the cyclical nature of this, and it's always going to change. But like for it to happen,
it was violent. Like it's kind of violent to move
overnight. This offseason is crazy.
We don't see trends like this change at the pro level like this quickly. Like everybody woke up and was like, all right, all our cover 3 shit's going in the trash on third down.
Well, one guy didn't.
Right.
We don't talk about him because we've already done it a long time. All right. That's it. That's a Too High podcast. Thank you for. We're still here in the off season. Don't worry. But I just want to say thank you for listening in to us talk about this pretty fun college and NFL season.
100%. You guys enjoy Sunday.
See you guys.